Welcome, Mr. Fox Protocol. Go ahead and give us a lowdown on what are you mining right now? Are you sticking with Ethereum to the bitter end, or have you already switched off? And if so, what have you switched off to?
Well, we switched off of Ethereum a while ago. I am a home miner, and I'm mostly packing older hardware. So I've got 20 series, 1000 series cards, and some old RX 580s still running here. I've been on Flux for a long time, probably at least the last 8 months. I've been on the Flux network primarily. I did switch off all my Ethereum rigs, and I've pretty much gone off the deep end and spec mining at this point because, Raven, Ergo are all great projects, but we're seeing the hash rate saturation on those right now as we've barely even touched the beginnings here on what the Ethereum hash rate is going to do to those. And I'm just looking at Raven coin. Like right now, we're seeing like 150% increase in the difficulty, which is absolutely nuts.
Right.
Uh,
And we still have 750 terahash, which I think is going to stay on Ethereum through the bitter end. It's looking like it, at least. We have 750 terahash yet to come off the network.
yeah, I actually moved all my old AMD cards. I took a dive. I found a layer one project called Radiant. It's not even exchange listed at this point. It's only been around a little bit. We've seen a lot of these little proof of work projects kind of come out of the woodwork, to try to fill the shoes of Ethereum. So, I've been kind of spec mining in that regard in this last week or two, hoping that maybe we can find a golden egg hidden in the because we've seen even Neoxa has a fork now, a gaming fork called Kaka.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's like and Kapow's notorious for having a lot of forks, just like Bitcoin, just because it's so easy to deploy.
Well,
But
and it was kind of it's a fork of Bitcoin too at the end of the day in
yeah,
reality, right? So I mean, obviously, Ravencoin fork of Bitcoin changed the algorithm, and then kind of like fork of Ravencoin, which is a fork of Bitcoin, just taking the algorithm and then kind of continuing on and on and on. I'm surprised that like the Komodo platform doesn't get utilized more for forking and smart chains, etc. I think it's a better option. I think it provides more security. That's a whole other tangent though. I still need to work on I've been working on that script for a while, which is like, why aren't you using Komodo, you dummy? Like, why go for Ravencoin, why fork Ravencoin when it's been proven that every single time you fork Ravencoin, it gets 51% attacked, when you could just fork Komodo and take all of the security from Litecoin and Komodo and apply it to your network and not have to worry about a 51% attack. It's absolute insanity. I don't know what some of these devs are thinking sometimes. But.
well, it's laziness is what it is in a lot of regards, because it's deployability. Kapow is literally a button click, and boom, you're deployed, you're active, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
It's all I'm not saying that the Komodo network's not necessarily open source in that regard, but it's just at the end of the day, I mean, that's why we're seeing, and I still think we're going to see a lot of hash rate migrate to Ethereum Classic, both with GPUs and the ASIC crowd, because it's a simple button push. Why risk the stability on your rig when you can just click over to Ethereum Classic? It's the same thing. It's the same deal. It's what you've been
But
doing.
already, if we're looking at it, it's looking like GPUs are not profitable anymore. Right,
No, no, they're not.
The ASICs on Ethereum Classic are remaining profitable. Like my iPolo back here is still like a few bucks a day, right? I think it's like 350 a day, because it's such low power, right? 250 watts at 300 megahash a second. But if I look at a 3090 or 3070 or anything like that, it's getting pretty close to, I think at this point, negative, and it's starting to show on what to mine. 3090 showing negative. 3070 I think is still showing positive. I'll do a refresh on here. On Ethereum Classic, it's showing 23 cents a day. Oof, that margin's rough, bro.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse. But I mean, this is, obviously we've never in the history of crypto had a moment like this. We've never had the number two project, proof of work project, move off like this. So, but I still think that, with the hash rate migration, I still think there's a lot of capital that still hasn't moved into these projects. So I don't want to discourage a bunch of people by saying, hey, right now it's not profitable. Will it be profitable again? I think is what a lot of people are wanting to know and are asking. And I mean, nobody has the answer to that.
Well, I think the
But
answer to that is yes. Because, just talking to Bits earlier, he saw this same problem. He had to turn off for a while in 2014, and then Ethereum came along. Something will come along. Enough shakes out, right, of the market that eventually you're at least somewhat profitable. The question becomes, who sits around with their rigs turned off and keeps them and holds them as capital until that day comes? And who accumulates instead of sells, right? And then who's going to go against the grain and do those things? Obviously,
yeah,
not financial advice, guys, but the people that win are the ones that typically do that, right? Like Bitsby Trippin won because that's what he did, right? That's why he's now able to afford building a Bitcoin mine, because I don't have the capital for a Bitcoin mine, right? But the reason he has the capital for that is because he did take those risks when it wasn't profitable in 2014 and that sort of thing, right? I think he was telling me he had 13 rigs that he had to turn off, and then ETH popped, and he was like, "Oh, turn those 13 rigs on." And at the time, that was a ton of hash power, 13 by 4 RX 580 rigs, I think is what it was. So
I find myself in a unique position because, like you're talking about your electric rate going up. I had the exact same thing happen to me. No notice whatsoever. Just 1 month to the next, my electric
mm-hmm,
bill literally doubled. And but I also kind of had a saving egg because I've been a part of the Flux network for so long. The PAs that I've accumulated, that Ergo payout is coming
mm-hmm.
now, so that is effectively helping me along with my electric bill during this time so that I'm able to spec mine these other
there
projects. So
there is something to be said for that. Like a majority of where I'm gonna, like, I have a bunch of Caspa to fall back on because I spec mined it before it was like
mhm.
before BZ Miner even had it available. You had to download the CUDA miner from like their GitHub and run that, and you had to have the node up, right, and all of that sort of stuff. And that put me in a position now to where, like, if I do have to sell, I have a little bit to sell to like cover power for a while, right? Spec
Yeah,
mining during a time when it doesn't appear, where it's not the most logical move. Once again, going against the grain. Like, I wish I would have put my entire farm on Caspa back then. Just that, I'd be perfectly fine now, right? So I think it goes back to that idea of kind of going against the grain, or what people, the crowd is doing, seems to be the way to actually capitalize on anything. Now, obviously not financial advice. It's just kind of things that go through my head when I'm looking at like how this plays out in the long run, right?
yeah, and I mean, I think people. I actually just had a discussion with somebody earlier about, what is spec mining these days.
Yeah.
Like, because everybody was like, for the longest time, if you wanted into a project, why not just mine Ethereum, sell it, liquidate it, and then go buy the project that you were trying to, accumulate, instead of mining at a loss or, not as profitable as what Ethereum would be. And to me, spec mining is finding those projects that don't have the exchange listings, that are
Exactly.
are really new to the scene, and you're trading your electrical cost for those tokens, or whatever project you happen to find. And and like you said, it's an against the grain kind of thing right now with the Ethereum merge. Everybody's looking, in my opinion, to the same old projects. You're looking at Ravencoin, you're looking at Ergo, you're looking at Flux. They're well established products. They've been around for a while, and everybody's talking about them as alternatives. But it's these up and coming projects now, because everything's changed now. Ethereum going away. We really need to look at some of these new offshoots, if you will, or these new startups, because who's to say where this hash rate's going to go? Who's to say what the new Ethereum is going to be in this? Everything's different now. And So spec mining right now to me made the most sense because I don't have anything to lose because Ethereum's gone away. So I don't have that revenue stream
Right.
anymore.
But I wonder
So
if it's actually spec mining while Ethereum was around was the most beneficial. And if I look at actually the profit margins on, I mean, I'll put it to you this way: from the launch of Caspa to now, solo mining with 1063 gigs made me more money than all the Ethereum
yeah,
in the past 6 months. So one rig, a 1063 gig rig that basically cost me nothing. It was basically like just old cards that nobody wanted anymore. Back when I got them, they were maybe like $25 a pop, right? 75, I think it was. But you know, you threw those on and one rig made more than my entire farm, basically, because it was just sitting on Caspa for 6 months or whatever. So I get where your perspective, like start spec mining now, but I wonder if like spec mining when you feel like not spec mining was actually the answer, right? Because that's the whole, like, and that's kind of where I'm sitting at now too, because people are asking, well, what's your plan afterwards? And I'm like, I think it's accumulate hardware. I think that's the play for me. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, though.
well, yeah, but I mean, like the point you're making, I think, is it's it's easy to mine when it's super profitable. When Ethereum, when 2021, that bull run was insane, and we saw record profits, and but it was hard to take a step back from that and look at other projects because it was so easy to be blinded by that. Like, oh well, times are good, why bother? Why
Right.
why bother looking anywhere else when times are good? But now here we find ourselves, times not so good, and it's turning out that a lot of these projects other than Ethereum were the ones that you wanted to be accumulating. And even though we're in a bear, we're starting to see alts popping off left and right here recently.
Yeah,
uh,
and we're seeing proof of work, GPU mineable proof of work
yeah,
alts are the ones that are taking off. That is pretty interesting because I was in a another Ethereum merge party live stream earlier that was more from the perspective of, this merge is great and awesome, everything's good, and we're so excited for it, which is great. I love that there's people that are excited for Ethereum and the merge, and I hope that all works out like we were talking about with Hawk before you came on. It is important to realize that we need Ethereum to succeed here, right? We can't be completely blind to the fact that it needs to succeed. So I'm glad that there's that excitement there. But they were saying things that were just verifiably false, like lower fees, right?
yeah,
Like scalability, false. All of the narratives that are getting pushed that are somehow still getting pushed surrounding Ethereum merge that are completely false. And it's very weird to sit there and listen to that to a certain extent, and then have to be like, okay, well, I trust these guys with making the decisions. It's just odd, right? It's like the changing of definitions, I guess, which is what they did because it was originally ETH 2.0, which included all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, just get rid of that. And we're just doing the merge, right? Very odd. Not a fan.
well, and it puts you in a weird position because you want it to succeed because it for the benefit of the crypto community it needs to succeed, because the alternative puts us in an even darker place than we are now. But like you're saying, there's some inconsistencies, there's outright lies being told, and it puts you in a weird position because you want that honesty, you want that transparency, and you're not getting it. So you kind of want them to fail, but at the same time, it can't happen.
Right.
So
Well,
and
and
we see,
with Ethereum in particular, yeah, that is an interesting portion because there is like the people that are just like, and I get it, I get the F ETH and stuff like that. Also, by the way, as far as I do have to address chat real quick. As far as addressing super chats and stuff like that, we usually save that towards the end of the show. I had planned out a full 3 hours of guests to come onto the show and have conversations. So that's what we're focused on because we got to hit them back to back, right? So I want to give everybody their time, but I just wanted to address that real quick. Super chats will be addressed at the end of the show. So Fox, tell me, are you worried, speaking of ETH and the merge and all that, are you worried about the possibility for censorship and moving further away from the fundamentals of crypto as ETH moves to proof of stake?
Ooh, I mean, you'd be a fool not to be afraid of that because a proof of stake platform really opens that up. Excuse me. Uh, it's just you have to hope that there's some integrity there, that won't occur. But it goes back to, like, you're talking about barrier of entry. You're transitioning your platform into something that is pay to play, pay to participate. So the people who pay the most are going to be the ones who are having the most say in what's going on. And you're also now completely at the mercy of the data centers that control the foundation of your network.
Yeah.
So it's,
well, not only the data centers too, right? You have this weird problem where now Coinbase and Lido control a majority of the staked Ethereum, even though it's other individuals that are putting into it, right? So you have a weird centralization problem there. You have multiple centralization problems. You have a hardware centralization problem from the fact of the cloud services, right? You have a centralization problem from who's actually controlling the stake, because people can't afford it. So they go into these, like, basically into these Ponzi schemes, if we want to be honest, of like, give me money, I'll stake it for you, right? Which is exactly what is going on with Lido and Coinbase. And then you still have like this oddity with MEV where, Flashbots can just decide to censor transactions because they control it, right? So
yeah. Well, and it goes back to a fundamental distribution problem, because in a proof of work scenario, and anybody can participate, anybody can get into the hash rate pool and get their fair share of Ethereum. And here you are with moving to a proof of stake model where to become a validator, you need to have 32 ETH. And we're not even going to talk about the Shanghai problem, where if you even to become a validator, you risk locking your funds and not being able to touch them. So, right. And 32 ETH is no small chunk of change for the average consumer. Like you're talking about, these, like you don't have the capital to go buy an apartment building. Well, whatever, given whatever the current price of ETH happens to be, 32 times that, is a significant chunk of change. Some people would much rather spend that money elsewhere than just to become a part of the network. And you're a small part of the network. You're not a large part of the network. You're a very small part of the network. So it's, yeah, I mean, the points are valid that, this is a huge, huge risk. I'm not even sure, I mean, we all knew it was coming. Ethereum has long talked about the fact that this has been their end game, their end goal. But, it's still kind of a sour taste as this happens, because there's so many unanswered questions revolving around it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, so it goes back to that problem we talked about earlier. We need it to be successful. We want it to be successful. But if I adhere to the fundamentals of crypto, everything inside me is saying, eek, at this point it should fail, because if it succeeds and we basically give the control over to basically centralized entities, what have we done with crypto? Have we actually solved anything? Well, it sure feels like we aren't solving anything if it all just goes back to exactly what all the other fiat systems have put into place in the first place. So that's kind of where you end up. There's that contradiction in what you want to happen versus what you think should happen, right?
Well, and we have another problem on the back end, I think, that hasn't really gotten much limelight, is you have a lot of this hash rate wrapped up in Ethereum. And granted, you can argue all day what the percentage of GPUs to ASICs is, but let's just assume for the argument's sake that it's a 50-50 split. So we have 400 terahash of Ethereum miners that are looking for a new home. And we run the problem on a lot of these projects that we could see some serious hash rate centralization in the pools as that hash rate moves.
Right.
Because a lot of people don't, when if you're an average home miner and maybe you're not that tech savvy and you download LOL miner, for example, you might just use the pool it defaults to. You might not pay any attention to that. So we're going to see a lot of this hash rate move to Ergo, to Raven, and it opens up attack vectors on those chains because we're seeing all of an unprecedented amount of hash rate move. And so I think as a community, we need to work on that problem on the back end, because that is something that the community can control or mitigate in a way, is that we all need to be diligent in our own right during this transition to make sure that we're not opening these new chains to vulnerabilities.
Right. And you bring up a very good point there, because I think if we look at Ergo, for example, 2 miners initially had, a 6 terahash on it, just earlier this week, and now it has 22 terahash on it. Whereas Nanopool both also had 6 terahash on it earlier this week, but now only has 8 terahash. So basically what you're talking about is 2 mining pools essentially sitting at the same level, 50-50, right? Yep. You had a huge increase, over 100%, 300% increase on 2 miners, and barely, a 30% increase on the next second one in place. So now you have a hash rate centralization on 2 miners for Ergo already, right? And we haven't even moved everything else over. So I think you bring up a very good point there.
Yeah, and it's just because, Ethereum Classic has survived a lot, 51% attack abuses. And the biggest pain in the butt that comes out of this is, and I don't know if it was you who talked about this, but the confirmations. That is the defense that a lot of these chains end up adopting, is right. It takes you 3 days to liquidate, or, even to move your assets from one exchange to another, because the confirmation times get so high. So that is something I would really hope that we can all avoid.
Well, that's already, we have to already worry about that with Neoxa. We already have to worry about that with Ethereum Classic, which, honestly, if we just look at this from a liquidation perspective, miners being able to liquidate, it's not easy, right? Because not only is, for the most part, volume low on every single exchange for all of these coins, right? But you have high confirmation times as well to deal with, and few services to go through, right? And 0 fiat pairings, right? Yeah. So you have your stable coin pairings, but you got to go to KuCoin, you got to get your stable coin, got to pay the fee to get out. So now you're adding in all these additional fees, trades, etc., that end up putting it in a very new spot for a lot of miners, right? They're going to get themselves pinged as well we are going to get ourselves pinged as well, potentially here, with a lot of different taxes and fees and so on, as we move into all these new different coins, right? So if you're not experienced in that, or just the dauntingness of actually doing it, a lot of people, that have been mining Ethereum have been mining Ethereum straight to Coinbase and then cashing out for fiat. They don't have experience with decentralized exchanges. They don't have experience with, any exchanges really outside of like your Coinbase, right? Or something along those lines. They don't know how that works, right? So it gets very tricky for a lot, I think, for a lot of people here soon, very shortly. And I think we do see some pretty big volume problems on Ergo, Ravencoin, all of them, even ETC to a certain extent, because ETC's confirmations, I think last I checked on crypto.com was like up to 5 days before your ETC confirmation is done. So it's kind of completely pointless to directly deposit Ethereum Classic to either crypto.com or Coinbase, because your confirmation times are so high that you're actually not going to be able to liquidate in time. And therefore you're not going to be able to file that properly on your taxes either. And you're going to end up in a position where you have a whole bunch of capital gain shit to F with now too. So it just gets very awkward very quickly.
Yeah. And talking about things that people aren't experienced with, I've also been noticing, with a lot of the hash rate migration that we've seen so far, is that, Raven has been an obvious choice for a lot of miners, but it's got a lot to do with the fact that, when a miner who's new to the scene, or, isn't, again, as tech savvy, not a larger miner, more like a residential miner, when they're changing in Hive or Windows their flight sheet over, Ravencoin has been around a lot longer. The overclock settings are very well known for Raven for pretty much most cards in existence, and it's very easy to switch over. Whereas you have coins like Flux and Ergo that are still kind of newer to people.
Yeah.
And they don't, and it's a lot harder to find reliable overclock settings for those coins. I work with Miner Pool a lot, and we've been seeing a lot of people come in from Ethereum to Flux, and and they're completely clueless. Like my Ethereum settings aren't working right.
Right.
What am I doing wrong? And it just comes down to pure lack of information sources. People don't have that information source. Especially if you're on Windows and you just are Googling Flux overclock settings.
Yeah.
And things like that. There's not a whole lot of resources out there. Even What to Mine generally lists the Ethereum overclock settings when it's giving you profitability list. It doesn't list anything else. So it's becoming kind of an interesting experience for a lot of these miners, because they're just they're still new. 2021 saw more miners come into the scene than ever before previously.
Right.
And Ethereum was the main catch for profitability wise. So nobody's really had to do anything like this where they've had to change things up on this scale. So it's part of the reason why I think we've seen Ravencoin difficulty wise increase so drastically compared to Flux and Ergo.
Yeah.
It's just because it's easier to migrate than it is anything else. And we're coming into the winter months, at least in our hemisphere. So temperatures are coming down more, and people were willing to tune into Ravencoin.
Yeah.
I'm seeing 90 degrees all week. I'm not that lucky. I can't turn it on yet. But,
me neither. But I got to get you to wrap it up now, because I do have another guest coming on. So thanks for joining me today. I think you brought up a lot of good points. I value a lot of what you had to say. I think you make some very valid points too. Got a little bit more deep into the proof of work side of things. Where can people find you? And down in the description below, I have linked, I believe, to your Twitter, so they can find you over there. That's what you preferred. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I have a small YouTube channel, but I'm not very active on there. I've got 5 kids, so
Okay.
It's hard to find the time to stream. But I am active on Twitter pretty much every day, every hour, all over crypto Twitter, which you can see my link there right below me. Would appreciate you guys coming and checking me out. And Son of a Tech, thank you very much for having me on tonight. It's always a pleasure interacting with you, and it's an honor to be on your stream.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Thanks for being in and hanging out. I'll catch you next time.
All righty, man.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to go ahead and check out more videos here, or of course, subscribe. For additional content that also goes into more opinionated pieces surrounding the politics around crypto, make sure you check out sonofatech.locals.com. There you can become a member for free, or even choose to support for basically additional content at $5 a month. It's helping me stay alive through the crypto winter.